Yeah, language apps did not really work for me. Maybe they work for vocabulary, they're great for vocabulary, but they also rely a lot on translation. And when I was learning French at the Alliance, we were just deterred from using translation as a means of learning. I was in Paris for a weekend and I came across these two guys, and we just got to talking. They were from the Ivory Coast. So the funniest thing is, apparently in their country, every evening around 7 or 8 o'clock, a majority of the people, they watch Indian soap operas, like Indian serials.
What? Imagine spending every working hour stuck at a job you don't love. A recent study showed more than 60% of working Indians would not recommend their profession to their children. So I decided to ring up my lovely friend Prapti Vyas, who turned her love for the language of love, i.e., French, into a profession. From copywriting to an English language assistant at
Académie de Strasbourg.
in France, her story will inspire and amaze you. And along the way, we'll pick up some fun tips and tricks in learning a new language. Stick around. A very recent observation of mine has been that a lot of people's decision making and a lot of people's life outcome, seems to be attributed to their upbringing, their childhood. How was your childhood like?
I grew up with a very loving family. I was surrounded by a lot of inspiring people, and I grew up with books. So that, I think, has been one of the major factors in my decisions later on in life. So yeah, my childhood has been pretty nice.
You remember the first book you ever read?
I do. It was the famous five. And it
Oh.
was, I think it was the first one, Five on a Treasure Island. And I remember that my mom had been pestering me. She'd been nagging at me to just like start reading, just so that I could like take up a hobby, do something more creative, not creative, productive, maybe something that will enrich me also as a person, professional growth, personal growth, whatever. And I never could get into reading, but when I was in seventh grade, I started reading. I don't know why. And then eighth grade, I had to switch schools. And that's kind of when I realized that I'm an introvert, and it was very difficult for me to go out and make new friends and just to be around people. So the best thing that I could do was to make fictional friends, and that's what I did. And it was to such an extent that the librarian knew me by the time it was already 6 months. Every day in the long break, I used to quickly eat my lunch and go to the library and just, I don't know, just read and try to be in that zone. And it became like a form of escapism for me. So it went from Famous Five, and it went from Famous Five to Sydney Sheldon, which was quite a leap. But yeah, the first book I ever read was Famous Five.
Wow. Once you completed your bachelor's, you moved into content. What was the impetus behind that?
It's actually a funny story. I knew I always wanted to write, right? But the content writing part, that was just an internship. And the motivation behind getting that as an internship was just so that I could make enough money to sponsor my next trek. Because I'd been to like my first Himalayan trek before I got this job, before I got this internship. And I think that has been a very pivotal moment in my life. It's just been a life-changing moment. It's been a milestone. It's just, anything that I can say about that journey will never be close to doing it any justice. But so after that, I just wanted to make sure that I'd not have to ask my parents for any money, so that just, I didn't want them to sponsor my passions or what I wanted to do. So the internship at Sci-Fi just came as like that, that solution. That maybe, okay, if I take this up, this is something I enjoy doing. Like writing is something I enjoy doing, and if it's paying me to do what I like, it was kind of a win-win. So that's kind of why I took it up. And eventually I liked it. I kind of fell in love with it.
In this whole process, this whole copywriting and your journey in content, somewhere in the middle, you fell in love with French. I suppose you were exposed to French. When was that moment? You know?
So the first time I was exposed to French was when I was in school. I was in about fifth standard, I think, and although right now I can't remember anything of what I studied back when I was in school, I just remember feeling that thrill of being exposed to a new language. And I think back then I did not know that I had a thing for languages. I did not know that I had a thing for words or anything. So I studied it for like about 2.5 years, after which I switched schools. And in the new school, I did not have any foreign language options. So that's kind of where I took an abrupt pause, and it was a long hiatus. And after I became a content writer, I kind of discovered myself as an aspiring linguist, maybe. So I thought I wanted to get started with like a foreign language, and I was considering Spanish or French. And I'm like, you know what? I started with French, and I just fell in love with France when I was learning French in school. I don't even know how to explain that. It just made me fall in love with France. And so I started again. I started studying French at the Alliance Française de Bombay, and it's just been a journey after that. It's been super, super, super amazing. And studying French was actually a lot of fun because there's a lot of similarities between French and English and also other languages, right? And English is essentially a language that is made up with borrowed words from a lot of different languages. So it was really fun, and it was a journey. It was a journey. I got to explore my interests also. I got to realize that I like etymology. I like languages. I just fell in love with it, and
Wow.
so here we are.
Uh, when did this become like a serious thing, like a serious relationship?
Oh wow. Okay, so I think this kind of started in 2019. I had just come back from a short project in Leh, where I had a client in Leh for whom I was writing, and I was going to start my new job in Mumbai again. But I wanted to do something else. I did not want to like confine myself to a 9 to 5, just a box. So and I just added things up, like because I thought maybe French would be a really nice way to get out of that rut, get out of that, I don't know, routine. So I took it up in 2019, and it just started as a hobby. It just started as a passion, because I feel like if I go into something with the view to, I don't know, capitalize it later, it's difficult for me to give my 100% to it. So as long as it starts as just something that I do for myself, I think that's how it started. And I just continued with my A levels, with my B levels.
The levels Prapti is talking about are the exams you take to get certified as a proficient French speaker. These exams are called.
Diplôme d'études en langue française.
There are 6 such exams: A1 A2, B1 B2, and C1 C2. And one more thing, you'd have to cross a minimum of B1 to be eligible to become a language assistant. Just keep that in mind. Sorry, Praps. Let's continue.
And continued again my journey in the pandemic online. Online classes weren't great because my attention span is very bad. But yeah, I don't think there was any point in this journey where I questioned myself whether or not this is going to last, because I think I knew it would.
You briefly touched upon the pandemic as a difficult period,
Yeah.
even if it were a hobby, right? But from what I understand, you were also working. You still had a full-time job. How did you manage the two like parts of your life?
Yeah, that's actually a good question, because before the pandemic, when we were actually working from the office, and I had to go to class, not just online. I think it was easier for me to manage. I say manage because it wasn't really a task for me. It was therapy. So I remember that the first 2 months of learning French was I used to go to office, and then I used to leave early so that I could attend my classes from 6 to 8 in Santa Cruz. And those 2 hours flew by. They used to fly by, and it was just so therapeutic for me. In those 2 hours, I was just like immersed in that world. I did not need my phone. I did not need any other stimulants. It was just it was just my time. It was my therapy time. It was very fulfilling, very rewarding, and that's how it was. But after the pandemic, during the pandemic rather, when everything shifted to virtual, so juggling a 9 to 5. Well, in the pandemic, it was like a 9 to 9 job because
Yep.
juggling that with like 8 to 10 like early morning classes was not easy, and I found myself like skipping a lot of my classes, because it was just not easy to juggle that. But even then, I remember some of my levels like B2 and part of C1 also, where I had these amazing professors, amazing, absolutely amazing professors, and it just made it so difficult for me to like skip classes,
Yep.
you know. But
Wow.
it was really nice. Even when it was online, despite a few hiccups that I had as a person, I'm not blaming anybody else. I'm blaming myself because I am just a person who finds it difficult to focus. But even despite that, just those 2 hours with those professors, and it was like a new start. It was better than coffee for me. Those 2 hours, I could start my day and feel better about myself, that I did something for myself, and then I can start like my day as a professional writer or whatever.
Did you start searching for a job once you hit a certain level? Like you said, once you completed these exams, French exams, did
Mhm.
you start searching for a job in France, or was it like a thing which
Um,
happened?
it just happened. Not really. I did not. I actually, when I started learning French, I had no expectations. That's kind of now my approach to everything, because that way things don't let you down. But
Oh.
it's always good to be a pessimist, right? But so I literally had zero expectations. I just went into it thinking that this is what I want to do for my personal growth, so that I can have something of my own, something that besides my work can define me in a way. Because otherwise, if I don't have anything else, it would just be my work, and that's not a very healthy relationship to have with your work. So French just started as like a hobby, more than a hobby, it was a passion. But I remember at the end of my B2 classes, we had like this one-to-one, one-on-one feedback with the professor, and we spoke about our options. And he asked me what I wanted to do later, and I told him that maybe a couple of months, a couple of years down the line, I would like to go into linguistics. I would like to study the linguistics. I would like to study etymology. And we talked a little bit about this, and then he told me that that there's a program where you can go to France as an assistant teacher for about 7-8 months, and you basically get paid vacations every 1.5 month. And so it's like you're going there and you're getting paid to travel, and you can work on your French. You can look for your higher studies, just opportunities, you know potential universities that you would want to enroll into, and potential courses and everything. And that was it. I never even knew about the existence of this program before, and he told me that this could kind of be like the perfect opportunity to like do everything. And it's obviously, when you're learning a new language, it would be like a dream to be able to go to that country and to be able to practice that language, to be able to like see everything or experience everything that you've been reading about, or you've been building up in your head. So it just came as, it was not planned at all. I did not even know if there was any future here, besides the fact that
Damn,
I just wanted to do it.
damn. You eventually did land that job, right, as a English language assistant.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce it? Academy de Strasbourg.
Académie de Strasbourg.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try that. How did it feel once you did get the
Oh.
job?
So when I got my confirmation last year, it
Yeah.
was very overwhelming, because I had no expectations. I did not know what to expect, like I told you. So it came as a pleasant surprise. And after that, with the formalities and everything, was very overwhelming. But once I finally got there, and I finally was able to go to my schools. So I had two schools. I had a high school and a middle school. So it was a very unique experience because I got to see I got to experience the French education system and how different it was from the Indian education system, right? And besides that, I think the part that I enjoyed the most was when I was growing up, my English teachers had a huge impact on my life. Okay, so whatever passion I developed for reading, for writing later on in my life, it's kind of because of my teachers. They were very, very motivating. I don't know. I was inspired a lot by them. And I kind of wanted to replicate that, for anybody, any student, even if it's just like one student, but if my interaction with that student motivates them to explore the language, not just inside the classroom, but outside the walls of the classroom. I think that would just make me happy. And besides, another really great point of being an English assistant from India in France was that I got to talk a lot about India, and
Oh.
it was. I had never thought I was such a patriot. Oh my God, I developed a very different appreciation for the things that I'd taken for granted. A lot of things that I'd taken for granted, and I used to try as much as I could to make my lessons very India centric, and my students enjoyed that. They lapped it up because even if they do know a little bit about India, it's not the India that we live in, right? I think there's a lot of stereotypes about India still floating around everywhere globally. And that's something that I really want to just stop,
Wow.
Because India is so fucking diverse, right? And it's not something that a lot of people know. So every time I used to tell my students that India has 22 official languages and more than 120 dialects, it blew their minds.
Yeah.
But it surprised me that they did not know that. A lot of things about India they do not know, because every time somebody speaks about Mumbai, the first thing that comes to their minds is the slums, which is fine. We do have slums and they're a huge part of our economy, but we are so much more than that too, right? That's not a defining aspect. We're digitally really advanced, like UPI and digital payments. We have Bollywood in Mumbai. It's literally the city of dreams, the city that never sleeps. So it was just an immense pleasure to be able to talk about India, to be able to make India just known to them as so much more than just a colonized country, a colony as it was.
Listening to you, I feel like if there were like systems where, kids at an early age had this opportunity to really understand every other country, it's also a function of our developed society that, we are extrapolated away, or we are extracted away from other places so much that we live our contained life. It is really fascinating. Like, it should be a part of education to be able to experience these other cultures, other systems.
Absolutely. In fact, I remember I was in Paris for a weekend, and I came across these two guys, and we just got to talking. They were from the Ivory Coast. We just started talking about things in general. They asked me where I was from, and I told them I was from India, and they knew so much about India. It was a shock. It was a surprise to me. And so the funniest thing is, apparently, in their country, every evening around 7 or 8 o'clock, a majority of the people, they watch Indian soap operas, like Indian serials.
What?
Yeah, and they named the characters from the serials, and I'm like, you know what? It just blew my mind. I'm like, I remember my grandmom and my mom watching this when I was little, but
I don't think they are watching the right things. Oh no.
It was crazy. It was unbelievable. I'm like, are you kidding me? But so apparently their education system or their environment is so conducive, to just exploration, and I think it was amazing. I think that's like a benchmark that I would love for our education system also to have. a system that exposes you to a lot of different things, and not just the stereotypes of those countries, but the cultures. Oh my god, it was like I can't even find a word to like put to that experience. It
Right.
was really something.
Wow. This is eye-opening to me, like in real time right now. Another dimension, talking about Indian culture, another dimension to this whole experience would be your parents. How did your parents react to
uh,
this?
they were thrilled. They were absolutely
Wow.
thrilled at first. That my mom. So my dad has had certain opportunities to travel abroad for business. But my mom never has had those opportunities, and she's like, all she said to me is like, it's just I couldn't do those things in my time or even now, but just the fact that you are getting to do it at such a young age, it's just something that I can relish in. I can be proud of that. And that was great up until the point that I left. And then afterwards, uh, it was not an easy time for them. I mean, for me, it was probably easier because there was novelty, right? There's
Yeah.
a lot of things to look forward to, a lot of things to discover, and a lot of myself to rediscover, besides a lot of things to discover. But for them, it was like coming back to an empty house, even though it was not empty, but it was like coming back to an empty house. And I
Oh,
remember my mom just like not being okay, just crying all the time because we're not used to being so far away, right? And my
yeah.
mom is a very sensitive person. So it was difficult. It was very difficult. I remember our Diwali video calls and my birthday phone calls, and I don't think there was like a single occasion, a big occasion where she hadn't called me and cried. And sometimes I would ask her like, "Okay, aapne kya khaya? What did you eat?" And she's like, "I don't know. You're not there, so I don't feel like making anything new. I." And then what we would do is that I would make something in France. I would make something new. I would send her a photo and I would send her a recipe, and she's like, "Okay, if you're making this, this looks nice. I might try that." Or sometimes you just get on video calls, and if she's feeling bored, to make anything, I would be there on the call with her, and just bato bato me, she'd be able to like make whatever she wanted to make, and then she's like, "You know what? If you hadn't called me, I probably wouldn't have eaten this."
Wow. That's
But
tough.
yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult on both of my parents. My dad is less expressive, as they're conditioned to be. But I
No
remember
shit.
just I remember him, like both of my parents, like even my dad tearing up when they were dropping me off at the airport. It was a heart-wrenching moment.
Wow.
But
If
they
you
were
can,
happy.
wow, wow. I don't know what to say. Yeah. If you can see tears in my eyes, that has nothing to do with me being emotional. I'm just saying. It's just my pupils are reacting to the intense light.
Oh, okay.
I do want to interrogate further uh, the life in France, but before that, I think you were a English language assistant, like you initially mentioned, right? What role does a language assistant play in the educational system?
Right. So I'm basically an English language assistant is basically like an assistant teacher, but in a way that you don't get an entire class to yourself, because that's a lot of responsibility. That's a lot of students just for one person. So what we would usually do is while I would have a teacher in class with me, and then we would split the class into two, and I would get half the students, and they would get half the students, and so essentially my role there was to make them comfortable, just make them at ease with the language, because English as a second language is not easy. Learning English as a second language is not easy. There's a lot of irregularities when it comes to pronunciation, spellings, and a lot of different things. It's not easy, so it can be intimidating. And one of the ways that you can get familiar with another language is if you talk to a person who comes from that nationality, maybe, or who's grown up with that language, grown up speaking that language. And with the teacher, I feel like the students have a tendency to get a little more closed up, a little, just like a little more reserved or reticent to certain things. But me, since I was closer to their age, so we kind of had those blurred boundaries, and I felt like they could be a little more comfortable with me. we would just it'd be a lot of informal conversations. We'd learn about like slangs or how spoken English is different from written English, and just colloquial English in general. It was just to be able to make sure that the language comes more naturally to them, as opposed to making it feel like it's forced upon them. So we do a lot of debates, a lot of activities, a lot of role-playing activities, or just uh, I'd make them watch like short films. We'd listen to some songs, or I would make them watch films like short films about India. We would talk about India and just contextually, in a cultural context, making the language more accessible to them.
I think a lot of your answers, like specifically these educational system answers are very different from the Indian system. So I'd like to, I guess, again, dive deeper into this. What difference did you observe in the French educational system as opposed to the Indian system?
Okay. So yeah, there's quite a significant difference, right, in the way the French education system works as opposed to the Indian education system. So the first big difference that I noticed was the timing. So it still shocks me that in France, students are expected to go to school every day from 8 to 5 in the evening, right? So that in itself is very difficult. It's very difficult to take in, you know.
Yeah.
It's very intensive and it's exhaustive rather. Um, they do have maybe an hour or two off, but you're still in school. It still does not count. Essentially, you from 8 to 5 you are in school, and afterwards you go back to like a buttload of homework and stuff. It's I don't think they have a lot of time to themselves, and
I'm shocked.
I know.
8 to 5.
8 to 5. It's too much because I remember like me or like even for you I guess it was like from 7 to like 2 7 to 3.
Yeah.
8 to 5 is
Yes.
exhausting.
That's like a full-time job. Like your child is less your child than your teacher's child, right? That's what?
Exactly, and the worst part was like in the winters. So in the winters they would leave their houses in the dark and they would go back home in the dark, and it was so difficult for me to just like comprehend that. And I'm like, I don't know how you guys are doing it. Just God. That was one of the major differences that I saw. Another major difference was in the manner of teaching. Right. I remember when English was taught to me as a child in school, it was maybe like Shakespeare, after later in the later stages. Or before that, it was just like a couple of short stories, a little bit of grammar. But in France, how it's taught is in a cultural context. So they learn about like revolutions. They learn about the you know anti-alcohol, anti-tobacco movements in the US. They learn about the Raging 20s. They learn about a lot of different things that have shaped the English-speaking countries, as it were. So they learn about feminism, they learn about a lot of different things culturally, which I don't think we were ever exposed to that. It was always just a very two-dimensional way of learning things. And in France, I saw they use a lot of audiovisual aids. I think almost every week the students are taken to like a movie screening or a play.
One very interesting facet of France and the entire EU, the European Union, is these blurred borders. Uh, I guess my question is the education system, does it take advantage of these blurry borders, as in field trips, travel to
Absolutely.
different countries?
Absolutely. It was so amazing for me it was mind-boggling for me to see that, because they every couple of months or something they have trips to like Poland or to Belgium, to Germany. Just oh my God. It is such a holistic way of experiencing things, of just like learning, of growing, of education, right? And I remember just like the in April, before I left for India, like I left for India in May, but before that I remember some of my students from the lycée, from the high school, were going to the US as an exchange program, as a trip with their teachers. And students from my middle school, okay, the tiny ones, they were being taken to Brussels in Belgium, or maybe it was Bruges. I don't remember. But yeah, just and so the when I was in France, okay, I had the honor of being hosted by a French family. So I was living with a French family in France, and she, my host, okay, Anne, she's a history geography teacher in the high school where I was also an assistant. So I remember she had taken her students on this on this just field trip kind of a thing to, I forget the name of the place, but it was a very important part of the Holocaust, right? It played a very important role in the Holocaust, and then just being able to be in that place, in being in presence of that place, it it's something that books can never teach you, right? That books can never give you. So every few weeks or every few months, they have a couple of field trips. They have a couple of trips they take just to broaden their horizons. To make these things accessible. Because reading about something and going to that place and actually just being in that place is two very different things, and they get to do
Incredible.
that. And I
Incredible.
felt a twinge of envy.
Don't talk about envy, please. After this call, you will see like furniture broken in my house. Why not me?
Now, honestly, Richard, if you do want to do something like this, there's a similar program in Spain, and there's like the age limit is 60, and you don't need to know Spanish for that. You can just go there and learn. You just need to know your English. You just need to give your IELTS exams, and you just need to get a score. That's all. That's literally all you need. And then you can go. You can go to Spain. You can stay there. You can live there for like 9 months. You can teach English. You can travel. And the best part about Europe is the blurred boundaries.
Yep. I think let's keep this on the record because there might be folks who,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I would, but I can only do this if this podcast does
Yeah.
something. Like I would need some economic support by the viewers.
Yes.
But this is incredible. This is eye opening. Like so, in these video games, you generally when you die, you spawn in another part of the video game.
Exactly. It's like a reboot.
Dude, this is crazy, unbelievable. I think you mentioned you were staying with your host. Was part of the same institution.
Yeah.
Because you're born and brought up in India, you have like you're kind of learning French almost at a later stage in your life, right? And even if you learn French, do you did you find it difficult to go there and then have like candid conversations, normal conversations um, without any drop in sort of understanding, without any yeah.
For the most part, no. For the most part, it was pretty. It was not that difficult to follow conversations. But then, since it's not my native language, since it's my second language, right? So sometimes when conversations are happening, it was very easy for me to tune that out. Like, so
Is
when
it your second language or is it your third language?
well, yeah, it's like a third language, yeah. But so when somebody's speaking in English or Hindi or Gujarati, it's very difficult for me to tune them out, right? Because I've grown up with these languages, but with French, it was an effort for me sometimes to be able to stay on track with the conversations. But later on, as time progressed, and I kind of got up to date with a lot of colloquial terms, a lot of slang. I think it became
What about accent?
oh.
Because I talk normal Hindi with an English accent. And that's enough of a difficulty. How's the accent thing there?
I love the accent. I feel like I have a fun time with accents. Accents, I enjoy doing them, and they come kind of naturally to me. So it it was fun. It was fun to be able to practice my French, to be able to practice my accent, to be able to hone my accent, and I just it was a very I don't know if this sounds like a little vain, but I used to enjoy people coming up and telling me that my French was good because validation. I'm a validation whore. But so yeah, accent was not really a problem. I feel like a great part of that, a great part of the credit also goes to the institute where I studied, the Alliance Française, because like I told you, right, in the French education system, the way they're taught is very different from how we are taught. But when I was in Alliance, that was what was followed in the classroom. We had audiovisual aids. We used to watch videos. We used to watch stand-up comedy. We used to watch I don't know, short films. We used to listen to extracts. We used to read newspaper articles. In a way that keeps you in touch with the language as it is right now, not just like a very archaic aspect or version of that language. So I think that made us very fluent in a way, the Alliance.
Beautiful. This I'm linguistically challenged. I'm not genuinely not good at learning languages. Uh, and I don't know about this the general population, but what would you recommend? How would you, if I were to ask you, I want to learn French, what would be your recommended roadmap, and how would you approach learning French for a grown ass man, for a grown ass person, not like a kid, because kids generally pick up languages
Yeah.
very very quickly.
Okay, so I feel like as Indians, I feel like we have a great advantage. Just the fact that we grow up with more than one language, is an asset to us. Because I feel like it was easier for me to grasp another language than probably it is for somebody who's just grown up with one language, right? Um, because I did see that a lot of my students were also struggling with English and even with German, which is a language that they have to study, considering that the region that I chose was kind of on the border. So I do think that we have an innate advantage that we can use. But besides that, I think a really good way to learn or just to immerse yourself rather than learn, immerse yourself in a language is to consume content in that language. You listen to songs in that language. You listen to news podcasts maybe, or just news emissions, radio emissions in that language. But the best way is to think in that language, I feel like, because we have a tendency to just default to our first language or our native tongue, but thinking in a foreign language or your target language is a game changer. Because I remember, even when I did not have classes, I used to speak to my cat in French, even though I know that she would obviously she's not going to say anything back or she's not going to understand.
What if she does?
I know, right?
Dude.
that would be kick-ass. But yeah, so I think the best way is to stay in touch with the language, and to journal in that language. So that way you get exposed to the words that you are going to use a lot more often in your daily conversations, in your daily life. So yeah, just reading, listening to podcasts or music or songs, and writing in that language, just expressing yourself in that language, thinking in that language, it goes a long way. Because even when I was learning, after my A2, I had a 6-month gap, right, before my B1, and I was not very well in touch with the language, and I was devastated to find that I had lost a lot of my fundamentals, even though they did come back to me after a while when I started revising them. But I do remember that I did lose a lot of my I don't know, basics, a lot of my groundwork. So yeah, just very important to stay in touch with the language.
What about apps? There's so many language learning apps.
Mm.
Is there have you tried out any, and like is it does it even work?
Okay, this might differ from person to person, but I have tried out a couple of apps, maybe like Babel or Duolingo, but I have commitment issues that extend also to learning or even to like watching a movie. And I just struggle with discipline, the person that I am, and well, I also have ADHD. Not that that's a justification to everything, but that kind of explains this behavior also. That I find it difficult to stick to something, to just difficult to stay disciplined. So yeah, language apps did not really work for me. Maybe they work for vocabulary, they're great for vocabulary, but they also rely a lot on translation. And when I was learning French at the Alliance, we were just deterred from using translation as a means of learning.
Oh, damn. That's a very interesting point. You are in real time translating from English to French, like as a means to learn itself.
Exactly,
Oh,
which may work after a certain point, after a certain
point.
point in your journey, but I feel like it may be a flawed approach, to kick off the ground. Because I remember that in school, that's what we used to do: translate English to French, French to English. And then when I had to speak in French, when I had to speak in French in school, I had to say the sentence in English in my head first. I had to think it in English and then translate it. And it was too much work. And translation, word to word translation, does not work. It's a disaster. It does not always work. So, but in Allianz, we were just like taught to not use translation. So we were just forced to think in that language. That's why I
How's
feel like,
mechanically speaking, how does that work?
okay. So for the first few weeks, jab, nobody in the class knew about the language, right? So it's difficult to go. You just imagine you enter the class and you've never learned French in your life, and the teacher is speaking in French, and you have to understand that, which was the case. We had a
Oh,
very senior teacher. She was amazing, but she was very strict when it came to this rule that no English in class. When you're in class, it's like you're in France. So 2 hours, no English, and then when we were learning vocabulary, she wouldn't translate it. She would act it out. She would gesticulate, or maybe she would show us an image of that thing, of an object, and you understood. So instead of making word associations, you made associations directly with that object. And I feel like that was very helpful. That was very helpful because now I can speak in French without having to translate it from English.
it's mind blowing. It's like, um, I don't know what to say. Because I realize that what dumbass. I'm just realizing I speak in Hindi not by translation. Oh my God. I need to go back to school, man. I
Oh,
really am.
I relate to
Dumbass.
that.
Wow. Now I don't know how to move ahead from this. uh, um you've stayed for a prolonged period in France. And I think it's pretty apparent just through this conversation that it's changed you, molded you in quite a few ways. How has France and the French people of France influenced your personality and your growth as a person?
That's a very intricate question. It's got a very nuanced answer. I'm not even sure I'll be able to do justice to it. But so yeah, France has definitely changed me as a person. I feel like in most of the ways for the better. Um, I've learned a lot from their lifestyle. All right, while I feel like they have a beautiful work-life balance. It's a beautiful work-life balance, and I love the fact that everybody out there is active. Because in Europe, it's more the culture relies more on walking, on biking, or on public transport than it does on private means of transportation, like cars or something, right? The lifestyle is very active, and they're very mindful about what they consume. Not I'm not talking about the content, but I'm just like talking about literal consumption. The food and everything, and it was just I loved their lifestyle, and I tried to adopt a lot of aspects of that lifestyle. Um, Another thing that France also like made me realize is that I love wine. Because oh my god, the I can't tell you how crazy it has been. Uh, just that it's a part of their culture, right?
Yep.
And just seeing a mother offer beer to her 18-year-old son was very weird to me. It was so weird to me, but at the same time, I don't know, it was kind of cool. And
Tell me, tasting like a regional 500 rupee port wine stands any ground compared to a French.
well, okay, Sula is pretty good.
Okay.
Sula is pretty
Yeah.
good, yeah.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
not bad at all. Sula is pretty good, but the first shocking part, I just entered the first time in my life. I am entering a French grocery store, right? And it's a departmental store, and there's a liquor section there. I lose it because that's never happened. That can never happen in India. It's a departmental store, and there's a liquor aisle. So I kind of just like lost myself wandering around, just reading off the labels and everything. And the experiences, I think people have a lot of stereotypes about the French, that they're snooty, that they're pretentious, which I really think it kind of just depends on the kind of person you meet, or the kind of, yeah, it just kind of depends on the person, because the people I met were absolutely warm and welcoming. They were so they were so accepting of who I was. They were curious about me, about my culture, about my language. And I used to make it a point to try to wear my Indian wear. I love Indian wear, okay, but I used to make it a point to try to wear that as much as I could to my schools, and just to expose them also to Indian textile, Indian fashion. Um, and with the French people, right? So I've had like the most amazing random conversations with people on the road, in the grocery stores. I remember this one time I was in Lidl. It's a really famous chain of supermarkets in, I think, all across Europe. Um, I remember just trying to buy some onions, just like looking for some onions and everything, and just like a really sweet little old lady walks up to me and she's like, "Oh, can you tell me how much this is for?" And I told her how much that was for, and then we just got to talking randomly, okay. And then she tells me that while she can speak French, she couldn't read or write French until now, and she's learning probably at 60, 67 or 70 to read and write in French. And she asked me if I could help her with her homework. So I kid you not, we were standing in the bread and eggs aisle of the supermarket. She had her homework sheet and her pencil and her eraser, and we stood there for 15 minutes and we did her homework together. And that entire day, that was the high I was riding the entire day. It was just so wholesome. And yeah, so I've had like tons of random conversations with just like strangers, and I think that's something that I remember very fondly.
There are millions of questions right now riding in my mind, and I'm trying to be disciplined and stick to the script. I don't want this conversation to like be like a never ending thing.
Yeah.
But to some extent you have pursued your passion, and one, you've identified something you love and you've gone ahead with it. Not everyone is privileged enough to do it. And second, not the courage to muster up to take those decisions is itself quite challenging. uh, but one thing very apparent to me is kids right now growing up, they are looking for that impact. They are looking to find that passion and pursue it based on your own experiences, right? Your own life story. What advice would you give someone who's in their college, someone who's just growing up, making this decision, or just finding things out about themselves?
I would kind of tell them what I wish I had told myself or somebody had told me when I was at that point, that it's whatever you want to do and you feel like maybe you feel like there's no future for this thing, but I feel like in today's age, today's world, there is a future for everything, So I would also tell them not to just like stick to the safe option just for the hell of it, because I kind of regret just wasting my 3 years doing nothing. If I had started my journey with my French journey probably like 3 years earlier, I don't know where I would have been right now. In a parallel universe, probably there's a version of Prapti who's already done that. But yeah, so I feel like whatever passions you have, I feel like you will find a way to make it work. And I mean, just imagine, right? A couple of years ago, there was no concept of having influencers. But now you can go on Instagram, you can go on TikTok or YouTube, and you talk about these things, you talk about the things you're passionate about, and you can make a living out of it.
Yes.
So because I know a lot of people who've done that, who've chosen the safe option, and they've chosen to stick to that, and it's not the most fulfilling way to lead a life.
Yep.
So yeah, that's
Beautiful. Ah, uh, I think that's about it. But thank you so much for giving the time. Thank you so
oh
much
no,
for
thank
having
you
this
so much for
conversation.
like having me on here. It was really nice to be able to talk about